I've used my airbrush quite heavily for the last few projects, and I'm going to use it for the next few as well. And when that's the case, I use it for a few days in a row quite heavily, you'll start to see some kind of performance degradation. You might see airflow being restricted, you might see some spotting appearing. That usually means it's time to do a complete strip down and clean. So I thought I'd show you how to do that. I'll show you with this, cheap eBay 20 quid thing that I use for varnish, which I can feel is a little tacky. I don't look after this one very well. They have a very short lifespan. I'd fire anything caustic, anything dangerous through this instead. And this is my Hardestein Infinity. I've had this for over a year now. It is an outstanding airbrush. Well, I say that it fits my needs really, really well. I've had other higher cost airbrushes before. This is by far the best designed one I've used, but it is a different construction, so I'll show you both. So the first thing to do is to strip this down, and if you've never stripped an airbrush before, then I'll kind of talk you through the parts. Obviously this is just a cover. I often use my airbrushes without that on, which is one of the reasons I enjoy this, because I can manipulate some of that in there. If you loosen this, I usually remove it. If you loosen it, then usually that will free the needle. As I said, I don't treat this very well. There we go. So that's a bit sticky, and you'll see there's a couple of points where it gets particularly clogged. One is just here where the seal is inside for the air paint mix, and the other is at the very tip. It's really important to be careful with these things, not to bend them. So when you clean it, you have to be very careful, because if you do bend a needle, it's pretty much over for that needle. Okay. So I could take the nozzle off. I can take the cover off that if I want to. There we go. That is just a shield. That's the business end. Your airbrush doesn't work without that hole. That's where the paint and the air mix. This nozzle here provides the paint flow, and the air is flowing around that through that hole. So this is important too. Now they usually provide you with a tiny spanner. You see there's got a flat edge here. 9 times out of 10 you can just use your fingers there. It should really only ever be finger tight. So that's the actual paint nozzle. If we undo this screw on the back, that holds the spring, which gives you your release here. That's just a channel for the needle, and that holds, that's a cradle that holds the needle and allows you to move the needle back and forth. Trigger spacer, and that's it, unless you need to go the extra step and clean the air channel, which is here, the little valve, which I'm going to show you because they're tricky and you might never have seen one before. I'm not going to remove that. That's just a retaining ring inside there that's held in by a screw. But I am going to take the valve out and show you the valve. I just need to get a tool. So there we have all our parts. I'm going to run some cleaning fluid. I'm just using any cleaning fluid. I have some Vallejo. I'm just going to use up the last of this as well. So to clean the needle, which is a delicate operation, I'm going to, sorry about that, I'll edit that. So to clean the needle, which can be a delicate operation, I'm going to saturate some kitchen roll, and I'm going to pinch the needle and run it back and forth, and I can feel the bumps, the ridges of paint, varnish in this case, on the needle. So I can feel when they've gone. Now be very careful with this. You see me going backwards and forwards here. If you pull too far back and then push forwards, you will stick this needle in your hand. So twisting is safest at the tip, because it prevents the tip from being bent. And that's fairly clean. This does have a slight catch at the tip, does have a slight bend in it. It is an old airbrush. It is essentially a scrapper. This doesn't hold any part in the paint flow, but if it gets any paint on it, it can catch. So a lot of this isn't really that vital to clean. The nozzle and the very nozzle tip and the shield, they're important. We'll come back to those in a minute. These probably don't need a clean. The trigger will only need a clean if you've got paint on it. The really important part is this channel here. This channel here, down inside there, from where the paint is from there the air is introduced, and then the paint is introduced, and then it's projected forwards. This channel's really important to keep clean. And I can feel I've got residue in there, so I'm going to give that a bit of a clean out. You find most of these airbrush cleaners, they're really good at removing paint. They are not so hot on varnish. It's another reason why I use this cheap scrapper airbrush for varnish. So you can see that there's been some damage here. There's quite a bit of build up. I mean, I wouldn't want my expensive airbrush, my Infinity, to be shooting the kind of stuff that leaves behind such a residue that this does, and it's so difficult to clean. I can, if I want, go to town on the outside. I'm not so bothered what it looks like, this one. I do want that channel to be free flowing. To that end, a set of these are indispensable. You'll probably use the smaller ones rather than you use any other. I find that one's usually a decent size to be able to get down inside the nozzle. It might be a bit big actually for this one. Yeah, it's a little large, down the size. Try that one. Yeah, there you go. So that's a nice tight fit in there. So I can put that in, put a bit of cleaner in there. I can run that back and forth. Really clean inside there. But I can also put that forwards through the pan into the air channel as well. And make sure that there's no particulate matter in there at all, and that it's all running nice and clean. You can see, even though I've been shooting with this airbrush cleanly, you can see all those particles coming out of there. As I say, this is not the airbrush I take care of very well, but even so, I am not very dirty with it. So I'm just going to give it a flush through, which is just to catch the water. Give it a flush through. This is a slightly messy process doing this, but that should have improved matters. No way. Take a Q-tip, go around the inside of the pan. And for something I consider to be my scrapper, and call it quits there, I'm just going to clean the nozzle. And to clean the nozzle, you can buy special tools. I tend to use an old airbrush needle. So this is an ancient needle I've had forever. It's very bent at the end. You can see that you couldn't really use that for anything anymore. But what I do use it for is cleaning the airbrush nozzle, because I don't feel bad about using it to scrape the sides, just scraping and pushing. I wouldn't recommend doing this with an airbrush nozzle, with a needle that you intend to still use, because it will completely mess it up. And you should always make sure you keep your fingers well out of the way here, because that will just stab you in the hand. See, there's a few small particles coming out through there. You know, when you're airbrushing, that that can ruin your day. It only takes that size to clog your airbrush. Look, that can ruin your day. So you'll see the other thing I've used this for, because I'm getting small black particles out here, is I use it for primer. Primer and varnish is what I consider my scrap airbrush gets used for. And I think it's quite useful to have both a good airbrush, in the same way as you do with paint brushes. You know, you have your good brushes and you have your base coat and dry brushes. You have a good airbrush, you have your ones that you don't care what you shoot through them. Okay, it's much better. Like I say, I don't use pliers or anything like that. I don't use the spanner. Just go finger tight. This isn't too bad at the moment. This is fairly clean, so I'm going to go with that. I did say I was going to show you the nozzle inside there. The trick with the nozzle, so let's have that old needle again. Trick with the nozzle, that's too large, is that you need to unscrew that thread. So as you unscrew that, it'll work its way down there, the spring will come out, and the little activator release in there, that is what you can feel the tension on when you've got the airbrush trigger in place. Yeah, that will spring out and you'll be able to clean it. I'm not going to bother because I've not had any difficulty with this airbrush. I am, however, going to do that for the Infinity. So let me put this back together. So you see all these things go back in here. And this can be, that piece there can be one of the fiddliest bits to get back into place properly. There we go. So that assembly goes in. Once that's tightened, you see that that's the carriage for your needle. So when you're reassembling, you always put this back in first. This isn't so good, but with the I'll show you the difference with the Infinity. The receiver here often helps you guide the needle in. So that's the scrap needle that we use. That's the newly cleaned airbrush needle. I've tightened that too much already. I have. Right through. Tighten up. See it appear at the end. Check that it withdraws when you activate the needle. Ask a few bits of loose and crap coming out. Put the safety, the needle guard on. That will be a functioning airbrush now. I'm just going to hook it up to air. Run a few bits of water through just to get rid of any loose particles. Ooh. Okay. We're not getting much airflow. Okay, I've got a problem with that hose. That hose isn't giving me much air. try that again. You can hear the pressure now. There we go. And you can see if I shoot against a dark background, you should be able to see the particles coming through. So that will give me a decent airbrush. A decent curved. I think they're brilliant. The feature this has that the other one doesn't have is that it has a restraining bolt essentially here, which if you see down inside the barrel here, as I lock that in place, that restricts how far back I can pull the needle, so it sets a maximum size for the marks I'm making, and I can adjust it with the roll, and I can release it any second and reactivate it. And that's really useful if I'm doing some fine work, if I want to paint on a very small area and I want to make sure I can't have a moment and overspray. But that essentially comes off and you're left with just the same as the other airbrush, but the construction is slightly different. So I'm going to strip this down, and I'll strip this all the way down and show you how different it is. Just find a screwdriver, because I'm going to need one. Okay, so same as the other one, if I loosen this, I can withdraw the needle. The needle doesn't have the same sticking points, it does have some paint there, and it does have a solid tip, so we're going to clean the needle. We can, on this one, we can remove and ultimately exchange, swap out for a larger one to the cup. That makes it easier to get down in there and clean. As I said, the shape here on the receiver for the needle is beveled in, so it helps you to locate it. I'll show you that again when we reassemble. You can undo this screw at the back. So the principles are the same, as you can see. So there's that screw, spring, and the needle carriage, trigger, and the push bar, which is much nicer design. Yeah. So we can see down in there, you can see the valve release. Needle guard is an open guard. I prefer that because it allows me to pinch off any paint build-up, but I can, again, get different options with the Infinity. I can change that. So off comes the guard. The nozzle, however, the nozzle construction is different in that it's a seated nozzle, so it's not screwed in. It sits inside the wider nozzle there. You can see down inside that channel, and back through into the airbrush. I'm going to remove the valve assembly on this one. For this, it's slightly different. I can just use a screwdriver and withdraw the valve. Comes out just the same way there. Just be careful because there is a spring in here. There we go. I don't want to lose that little spring. And now the push rod should come out. I'll reach for my little dentist tool here. And out comes the little push rod. And you can see over time there's been a little build up of crap there. Might just be causing some problems. And there's some schmutz in there that needs to come out as well. So we'll start with the barrel. And some kitchen roll. And just going to give the outside a wipe down. See the paint comes off. It's a treated surface this, so it cleans up really quite easily, quite well. I'm not going to go to the extreme lengths of trying to polish it. It's and we're going to reach for our small brushes again. We're just going to see which size fits. Obviously that very small one will fit through. Not sure about this next size up. certainly fit through there and into there. Put some cleaner in, work that brush backwards and forwards. Now we're going to rinse. Take a smaller one through to get further up. And you can see I'm getting some small particles, just a few tiny bits, and I'm much more careful with this brush in general usage than I am with the other. Even if you're being very careful with an airbrush, you're still going to get some build-up of paint. So if I want to clean through that, I can put the if I want to clean through this channel, I can put the nozzle of the water in here, and I can flush down through it. And if I work the brush back, it'll come out the inside there. A little. See, we get little bits of corrosion, little bits of paint caught, little bits of corrosion. You don't want is for those flakes to break free while you're airbrushing, because they will clog your needle. So you just need to get them out. You see, we're getting quite a lot of nastiness out of there. I think you'd be surprised if you give your airbrush this treatment, what kind of stuff you get out. Like I say, I don't do this every week, but if I start to notice a drop off in performance, or after I've done a major project, then I will kind of give it this treatment. I'll go to town on it, clean it all up. Because they really are only as good as they are clean. Okay. Move on to the nozzle. That guard's fine. Just need to take some of the paint off the inside of there where you get a little build up. Again, this is not a working part. This, however, is. So let's check this for cleanliness. That's not too bad. Just get a Q-tip down in there, though. Okay. Just go around the outside. Excellent. And here, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to put some in there. I'm going to take the ancient, bent and broken needle. I'm going to give that a good scraping around inside. And again, you can get a tool to do this, which is essentially just a robust needle. You can see I'm getting some particulate out. Probably more than I should. Slightly embarrassing. Okay. There we go. So, take a look at the needle assembly. The pressure valve. Put that back together first. Okay, I'm going to test that. Test that by dropping the trigger into place. Feel some bounce back. Just going to connect it to the air and make sure the air flows before I put any of the rest of the airbrush back together. That's a yes. So I'm good to continue reassembling the airbrush. Just going to take a look there because I did see some dirt there. It's fine. Okay, so trigger goes in. If you're stuck for how to put your trigger back together, it's always however it's comfortable. So if I put it like that, that's not comfortable. But if I look and put it the other way around, so the scalloped edge is usually towards the rear because that's where the action is. Put the cradle in, screw that in place, put the nozzle in. Now on this airbrush we put the one nozzle into the other. The reason for it is it makes changing size really easily, because I have a set that is another nozzle and needles, so I can go up to a 0.4mm or down to a 0.2mm very quickly just by swapping out the needle and the nozzle. So put that on, and as I showed you, I haven't cleaned the needle. Just clean up the needle. Same way as the last one. Drawing it through, turning it. You will need to replace airbrush needles sometimes. They're the most fragile part of the machinery. They're not usually expensive. Essentially, I guess you need to consider them a consumable. So you see that the shape of the receiver means that I can guide the needle in much more easily than on the cheaper airbrush. and out it comes at the other end, and then tighten that. Replace the guard. The cup just needs a final clean. Again, with this airbrush, I have a larger cup. I don't really need to use it ever. In fact, I don't think I've had it on. Because for what the scale of models I do, this is more than large enough. In fact, I could probably work with just that. Connect it to the air. You can see what I'm talking about there. You can see the mix of the air and the paint as the needles withdrawn. Paint, water, but that will do it. That's how you clean an airbrush.